Thank you, everybody, for making the time. Andrew, thank you. As always, this is the best event in the industry. Always glad to appear, and thanks for the invitation to share some of our findings at Booker. We have a half hour, which is great. I was just saying to Andrew, it's great. It's perfect kind of fourth grade attention span, so we'll move quick. We'll keep everybody interested, and I give you credit for not being outside in the sun right now in Arizona. As Andrew said, we at Booker have been building our business. I've been at Booker heading up marketing for about 2 years now, and we've built our entire, not just marketing department, but actually we've started, as you'll see as we get through the presentation, we've built our entire business around content-driven demand gen. Every single aspect of the company now actually drives around it. It would become not only marketing-driven, but within marketing would become content and demand gen-driven. So we're talking about taking a smart approach to content-driven demand gen, because I will be actually taking us kind of through where the organization was when I got there, which was really kind of an ugly, bad spot. Some of the people in the room I recognize had sat into my case study the other day, Monday afternoon. So I'm just going to buzz a couple of those slides just to set context for the rest of the people that weren't. But that will set the foundation. I didn't spend a lot of time on this slide, if you couldn't tell, but you'll see it gets a little bit meatier than this. So when I got to Booker 2 years ago, basically, very, very round terms, there was no content team, there was no marketing nurturing, there was no product marketing. 50% of our sales were from outbound cold calling. About 40% or so were from inbound. Of the 40%, they were basically split between trade show and paid search. 40% of the inbound, there was no attribution. I had no idea what was going on. So I took a quick people process technology approach to the issue. I lay this out just very quickly so that you understand everything that follows and how we built. We built on a really solid foundation around people, processes, and technology. So when I came in, there were about 10 people on the team. They were all kind of doing their own thing. They didn't talk to each other. They didn't work with each other. They were vertically integrated in and of themselves, and they just basically didn't even deal with sales. What I did, though, was I immediately put into place an interlock, a matrix organization where everybody would work together and everybody would actually drive towards the goal of a content-driven demand organization. What you see, and I point this out because a lot of organizations don't take organizational structure seriously and importantly, and especially as a driver, a constant feed and driver into demand gen. So you take a look at, we have basically, from right to left, we have the voice of new vertical markets. Our product marketing drives straight into our marketing team. Existing markets, the people who manage our vertical markets in terms of what's going on in the market, what's trending with our customers, what's trending with competitors, and so on. Channel support, the voice of all of our channels into marketing. And then finally, acquisition lead gen around SEO. What are our prospects searching for? What are the triggers? What's going on? What's driving it? All those vertical points drive into horizontal support points. So you have common voices in, common voices out. The horizontal is supporting the common voices out. So the corporate brand reputation communications is what you would expect. The go-to-market and creative operations is a big one, because not only does it make sure that your design, your look, your feel, your landing pages, everything are uniform, but because when I talked about the organization being vertically integrated from top to bottom, we can actually execute anything we want to do literally within minutes, hours, days. And I'll get to the importance of that shortly. Demand gen, client communications management, that group, it's basically 1 or 2 people, they control everything that goes out to every audience with management and responsibility for frequency, message, you name it, offer, whatever it might be. So we have a group that owns the voice of the marketplace and the customers, and our employees. They go to market and creative, the look, the design, the brand, the feel, the demand gen, how frequently and who we go out to, and then finally the competitive intelligence and research. So that's just the organization side. We rolled into basically mapping out and creating across the buyer consideration cycle, our different engagement streams, our different content. We started with 3. We ended up with 5. Probably the most interesting that most organizations don't do is we start with unaware. I have worked in the SMB space for about the last 20 years in the tech space, and I've also worked in the enterprise space, though. And one of the things that you always want to do is you want to frame the RFP before the RFP comes out. So when you're catching potential buyers in the unaware state through social media, you're actually laying the groundwork, the awareness of your brand, the awareness of your offer in a completely non-selling mode when they're not even aware that they're in the market. A little bit more point around buyer mindset. We touch on buyer mindset now, buyer psychological state. I'll get into that a little bit more as we've gotten more advanced. But this is stuff that we laid out a couple of years ago. Of course, we had the perfunctory personas. So with the basic nuts and bolts of content marketing, the basic structure around how we would approach markets, the basic structure of how our team would roll, this is basically, I never reveal my whole marketing tech stack, but this is where we were through the end of the first half of 2015. My CEO gets nervous when I do, so I just give him looks a little bit backwards. But we lean extremely heavily on Marketo and Unbounce for landing pages. SpyFu, Uberflip is a huge hub for us. If I had to kind of pick a couple that are real drivers for us, it is definitely Marketo, Uberflip. Moz is, Moz, I mean, they're all extremely important, but they were the foundation points for us to start to rev up. So we hit the people, the process, the technologies. It allowed us to take a pretty straightforward approach to branding. Our content drove into what is a fairly straightforward brand tactic. I bring this up because it sets the foundation for where we're going and what content-driven demand gen allowed us to do. What we saw, though, with that basic approach, we drove some really big results. Span of a year, we had about 3.5 times growth in terms of engagement lead volume. We cut our spend by 60% thanks to content-driven demand gen. There were 90,000 dead leads in Salesforce when I got there. We engaged 14,000 almost immediately. Our organic leads driving inbound. Our inbound is now about 100% of all of our leads. I mean, of all of our contracts, rather. Organic leads outpace paid search. Our churn's cut in half because of targeting and context and people opting in. And then our lifetime value is up dramatically. So all of that was really good. It led to actually a Series C $35 million fundraise for us, which is what really matters in the scheme of things. So that's the groundwork of where we got. This is all really good. This got me promoted to senior vice president. This got most of my original team promoted and hired away. So I had to rebuild a team from scratch along the way, too. Is Ashley Taylor Anderson here? Well, she's at Ciros. So if you see her, say hello and do some business with Ciros. She's a star. All of that was actually just a stepping stone and foundation point. I'll say, obviously, you never want hubris to set in. You never want to say, well, we got great results, so let's just ride that. That was all just a stepping stone. I'll get into some of the next stepping stones. As we rolled into the second half of the year, all of that created the groundwork to really dial it up in terms of what are now very front edge technologies in the space. Probably a number of companies, or how many, just raise of hands, how many people are using real-time personalization? About 4 or 5, 6, okay. How many are using predictive lead scoring? Okay, probably about 20% of the room. Database multi-point profiling. Almost no one. Okay, so at Booker, this is not by means of chest beating or anything else. It's all of that laid the foundation to engage these things extremely quickly. So in the case of real-time personalization, we faced the dilemma. We've primarily been a health and wellness company. We wanted to blow out vertical markets, and we wanted to actually introduce an acquisition retention marketing product. So what we did was we actually used these different tools and rolled them out to actually make it happen. So while we're doing it, of course, we still have to keep the lights on. We have to hit our lead numbers. We have to keep growing our lead numbers. So as we actually went into the second half of 2015, the numbers I had showed you in the previous slide, we actually dialed it up even more. So year over year, at the end of the year, our engagement funnel was up 6.5 times over the start of the year. Our lead purity was up. We actually cut our non-targeted leads by about 55% while we were dialing up the engagement from the other side. The real-time personalization, we're able to roll out into 6 new vertical markets that were completely disparate from what we had been in the span of 30 days. Our entire site is entirely driven by real-time personalization. Reason for that and the criticality of that for us, as we moved from health and wellness, where you have a fairly common homogeneous target buyer, we moved into things like pet services. We moved into home services, field services. So you go from the man or woman who owns a spa salon, really nice location-based setting, very common set of customers, to actually rolling the other way. You have field services, so you have people cutting lawns. You have people who are plumbers. Very, very different audiences. The worst thing we could do as a company, have the first experience be out of context, so jarring and out of context that they would leave. With real-time personalization, each experience is entirely tailored. All of the content from images, videos, testimonials, case studies, blogs, everything is entirely geared around that person. That person wouldn't even know we do the other categories for the most part. Real-time personalization through Marketo allowed us to do that. Our SALs are up 3.8 times year over year by the end of the year. The nurture stream with database profiling and predictive lead scoring allowed us to tune and target and optimize from those optimal prospects. So predictive lead scoring, just a quick thing. Basically, you can take a database, you can take your existing, your prospects as they're coming in, and score them as they match your existing customer base. So you're able to quickly determine your A leads from your B leads, from your C leads, from your D leads. What that allows you to do is actually hit each lead with appropriate content that befits where they match. If a customer is a prospect, and I go back to the keynote this morning in terms of context and concrete and contrast, we're able to basically tell these companies how good a customer they will be if they go with Booker, what the rate of return will be based on how much they match our best customers. They might not even know what a Booker is, but we know how good a customer they'll be. And we create content that drives right into that. Just another example. Keep sales happy when your sales accepted leads are up 3.8 times. Let's see, upsell increased over 70%. Another piece is we added to the marketing tech stack with content that drove right into it. Now that we had all this foundation in place, there is software out there that basically allows you to profile your competitors, competitive software that's being used, and actually by segment, you're able to then actually target them with content. Content can be everything from expected rate of return if they come with us, competitive weaknesses in the other player. It can be any number of different things where the content is tuned very specifically to that specific competitor and that specific utility, and then just load it up in a nurture stream. So the cost of engagement, the cost of sales, the yield is almost nothing. Let's see, the predictive lead scoring. We've been now doing that for 6 months. We actually have increased the quality of our leads even further. The A leads have actually increased by about 25% since we introduced this last summer. So basically, when you get into predictive lead scoring, you're able to understand the quality of the leads by channel, and then just basically tune and dial and optimize as you go. And then, of course, as I said earlier, when you actually hit them with the appropriate content, because you know what kind of customer they'll be for you before they even know, it's an extremely productive dynamic. We use content-driven demand gen now in our marketing tech stack to introduce referral partner and reseller channels with basically no other marketing support. We basically have sales teams that go out and recruit. We're able to get lists. We're able to hit them, nurture them. That is if you've worked with resellers and you've worked with referral partners, the more you are contextual, the more they understand what you do, the more they understand the fit, the more that you're in their face, the more they remember you, the more they give you business. So a nurture stream is extremely critical in that context. Strategic partnerships are now assessed and valued through our content demand gen platform. This is a really different twist. This I thought was really cool. I haven't heard of any other company doing it. As our business development people go out to big potential partners, what we do is we actually can size and scope the return on investment for both sides of the party before the deal terms are signed. So we basically carve out a chunk of their database, we carve a chunk of our database, we actually launch specific content streams and nurture streams and campaigns into that target customer base. We find out the open rate, the click rates, the action, the leads, the contracts that come out of it, and then the deal has a value that's concrete before the deal terms are signed. So we actually now, instead of doing 1 or 2 of these a year, we actually, it's driving my team a little crazy, we actually have about 6 of these rolling at once, to the point where it is just a constant barrage. But as you can imagine, in terms of strategic partnerships, especially channel partners coming in, you can open up the aperture of the company really quickly. And that kind of goes back to, I said that content-driven demand gen has actually changed the entire company. The entire company is now driven around that. Our head of business development leads every discussion with a potential partner. We can actually take our content engine and we can actually show you how much value Booker will have to you before we sign any paper. So that's actually a pretty cool revolution in terms of how content-driven demand gen can actually drive an organization. And then launch a new product area. We made an acquisition that we haven't announced yet. We will be in the next couple of weeks. But the business case was such that our CFO wanted to, knowing what we can do on the content-driven demand gen side, wanted to build up the business model for the acquisition with extremely low CAC, cost of acquisition from the marketing side. So basically just repurposing some of the content that we had, already using the engine we have in place and building out nurture streams with no ad spend, driven entirely through content-driven demand gen. We increased the client base and free trials by greater than 50% of what they had on their own without it in the first 60 days of launching. It's actually turned our business model for 2016. Because we're so far ahead of projections, we're actually about 80% of what we thought we would be at by the end of 2016 at the end of January, driven by content-driven demand gen. So when I took the first few slides to talk about the foundation that you really need to have in place, but once you have it in place, really, truly, the sky's the limit. So just a couple of quick year over year. 2015, raw leads, MQLs, SALs, VSB, very small businesses. We are in the small business targeting industry, but we do not want businesses that have 3 employees or less. They tend to be high in customer service costs, high in sales costs. They churn very quickly. They're just not ideal for us. But while we were chopping the non-preferred leads by 55%, we were jacking our total leads and our quality of leads pretty significantly. Our real-time personalization lead yield, 4.2 times up from what it would have been prior to real-time personalization. And then the new channels I spoke about, by year end, they actually were accounting for 30% of our total deals closed. So from non-existent to 13% of deals closed in the span of literally 9 months. In terms of content-driven demand gen changing a whole company, we are just in the process of launching a rebranding, repositioning of the company. Because content-driven demand gen, by definition, is driven around the user's needs, the user's outlook, the user's, quite frankly, hopes and aspirations. We went from what I showed earlier, which was certainly not a function-driven brand. It was about run and grow, and that's all very good, but that's really kind of what we'll do for you, versus how we can change the way you run your business, how, quite frankly, we can change your life in terms of working with Booker. And again, this is all on the back of content-driven demand gen. Next steps, as we look forward, these are things that we're starting to do to varying degrees. On the first bullet, when you combine predictive lead scoring and deep database profiling, you can actually increase sales velocity pretty significantly. We have, and it's a little bit odd, you might think, we have actually introduced some outbound aspect to our sales channel. Actually, understanding with predictive lead scoring, when you basically buy lists, where what would have been random companies fall in terms of how they fit with your database, and you're able to actually hit them with relevant content. What you've done is you've effectively, if you do this in advance of outbound calls, you've actually created the dynamic, especially for A leads, why would that person not take the call? So instead of outbound sales just pounding away and they don't know what the hell a Booker is, you actually have created a case for the business owner, why wouldn't you take the call? Because I already got this piece from Booker that said I should return, I should expect 8x return, I should do this, I should do that, I should do the other thing, all based on a company and companies in my area just like me. Predictive content combined with predictive lead scoring. Predictive content is kind of one of the other next things to come, where we're basically based on content combinations, specific targets, combined with predictive lead scoring, you're actually able to expect the yield from specific pieces. This is actually where we at Booker will be moving towards, basically in the coming weeks and months. It's pretty exciting as you dial it down that hard. Biopsychological state mapping of content. This, I think, is actually the great greenfield in content. As I look at everything that's going on, one of the things we touch on, because I've been kind of a student of it for a little while, and this is the last slide, is most companies, and it was even touched on a little bit in Tim's keynote this morning, do not take into account that through the buyer consideration cycle, while there are certain stages you go through in terms of the framework of how you think about buying, and of course you can come in at any point and you can decide to buy it, from the last stage or all the way through, has different paces for each individual. A lot of the pace and a lot of the outlook is actually geared around the buyer's psychological state at the time. So for SMB, at the start, in terms of where they are, they engage you based on needs. Second is their cost. What the actual solution is and the risk at the start of the buyer consideration cycle, almost non-existent. As you roll through the buyer consideration process, they also want to know what kind of people they're going to be dealing with. So then you start to see some of the logic behind our rebranding and repositioning. As you get into phase 2 of the evaluation, you see those curves start to go down. The needs actually starts to drop. The risk starts to rise. Cost is not even in the picture because they're mostly concerned about what's the solution going to be. What's the best solution? But as they actually close and move to commitment, risk becomes the biggest driver by far, followed by price. So if you actually tailor your content, the tone, the language, how you approach, understanding the psychological state of the buyer and what their point of interest is and what their point of concern is and what's going to be a trigger to actually move them forward, or in some cases prevent them from stopping, because actually engaging the wrong, people always say, well, are we selling hope or are we selling fear? Clearly, actually at different points throughout the buyer consideration cycle from a psychological state, if you understand it, there are different points at which you could sell hope or fear depending on your product, the opportunity, your target audience. However, you might be selling fear when you should be selling hope, or vice versa. But the framework puts a little bit of science to it. So I would envision actually, just as we have built algorithms around behavior, we will in the course of the next few years be actually building algorithms around individuals and how they purchase. There are companies that we have started to work with that have 200 data points on each and every single person in this room. If I want to overlap the personal 200-point personal profile on a business owner with the 50-point profile on that business, I can get a really strong understanding very quickly of who exactly I'm targeting, who that person is, and so on. But I don't have a means yet of understanding how that person as a person makes purchases, especially purchases like ours. But I think that's coming. So it's one of the things, like I said, at Booker, we've dabbled and we played towards it, but we don't have a science around it. But it's coming. So that was basically it. I think we have time for questions, Andrew? I was moving fast, mindful of lunch and.
Jim, before we break, you got one here, Keitha.
Yes.
Can you repeat that, Jim, for them?
Sure, that's a great question. Question was basically, so at the operational aspect of our marketing tech stack, we use Unbounce and Marketo. We use actually Marketo for massive, massive chunks of everything we do. We found Unbounce actually to be a better, more versatile solution for landing pages, allowed us to do things really, really quickly. So we literally can set up landing pages in minutes, especially as we've templatized them. I'm sorry? I'm sorry? Yes, they are. Yeah. Oh. Yes. Yeah, no, I got there and I had, quite frankly, a rough first few weeks where at one point the CEO called in every person individually from the marketing and said, what the hell is Jim doing in marketing? Because basically I got there and I would watch a head of business development walk by and cherry pick 5 people he liked from marketing, and they would all do one of his projects. I found like the person who ran our spa vertical market and our salon vertical market never spoke to each other, even though they were friends, and would be creating ads, would be doing all sorts of stuff. And it was just kind of a mess. Also, the second day I was there, I went into our Marketo system, and it just had to be torn down and rebuilt. So a lot of it was kind of diagnostics around how things weren't working, how things weren't built for scale, how people weren't thinking as a team, they weren't working for a team. The structure they laid out, literally everybody has to work together to do their job, and everybody does, and we have a great time, and that creates great results, and the more you get great results, the more we go out for beers, and the happier everybody is. So it was not small, but I do have to say, as I said in the case study, one of the reasons I've been able to do what I've been able to do and the team's been able to do is that we have literally full autonomy from our board, from our CEO and CFO. Most everything I've done has been self-funding. So as we're cutting paid search by 60%, that was helping us fund additional people and marketing tech stack. As we're reducing churn, as we keep optimizing, whenever a new tech stack piece comes out, we're right on it and we're testing it. And we turn over our tech stack literally every 3 to 6 months. So it's, did that answer your question fully? All right.
Thank you very much, Jim. Awesome.